What do I say to people who say they hate religion but love Jesus? Oh, I've heard this so many times from Christians. There was actually a really popular YouTube video about a year ago from this guy, Jefferson Bethke, where he did this whole slam poetry sort of thing about how he loved Jesus but hated religion, and the church was bad but Jesus was good. And, look, hey, if you hate religion, we're on the same side here, because I'm not a fan of it either. So I'm glad we're on the same page there. But I do take issue with this idea of you following Jesus and yet you trying to disavow yourself from saying you are a Christian. Because let's face it, those are the same thing. You're just trying to make yourself sound better. And really, what does it mean to say you're a follower of Jesus, but you're not a Christian? What's the difference? What's the separation between the two? Because when you put, a Christian and a follower of Jesus next to each other, they look pretty much the same to me. But if you want to be a follower of Jesus, let's talk about some of those things that Jesus talked about, because Jesus never talked about creationism. He never said the world was 6,000 years old. He never said we ought to teach the Bible in science class. Jesus never talked about homosexuality or that it was wrong or a sin or anything like that. Jesus never said women weren't allowed to have abortions and that we ought to protest outside of Planned Parenthood or anything like that. Jesus didn't tell you to vote Republican either. And I would almost bet a lot of money on the fact that a lot of those followers of Jesus vote the same way as Christians. Like, who would have thunk? And Jesus never said, you have to be abstinent before marriage, and that's the way it is. So Jesus never said those things, but a lot of Christians do. So the first thing I want to know from these people who say they love Jesus but hate the church, okay, which of those things do you also do away with? Which of those things would you get rid of? Because usually there's not a lot of Christians, and there are some, but there are not a lot of Christians who say, yeah, no, homosexuality is fine, and I support a woman's right to have an abortion, and yeah, I think science class should be taught with evolution because that's just the way it is. I don't hear enough Christians saying things like that. I really would like to know what the difference is between the two, because they seem to believe in a lot of the same things. Even if it's not the social issues then, it is certainly a lot of religious beliefs. Jesus followers believe in sin. They believe in prayer and that God's gonna make everything better. They believe in evangelizing. That I, as someone who doesn't believe in God and certainly doesn't accept the resurrection of Jesus, they think I'm someone who needs to be saved. That happens whether you're a Christian or a Jesus follower. They believe in the resurrection. That Jesus followers believe that. They believe in miracles. There's no evidence for any of this. But if you're a Jesus follower, I'm supposed to what? Let that go? I'm supposed to be okay with you believing that nonsense, but not the other nonsense? But when it comes down to it, what a lot of people, I think, mean when they say, I believe in Jesus, but I'm not a fan of the church, I think what they're trying to say is that Jesus cared for the poor. He cared about the people who were less fortunate. And you know what? That is an important value to have. I think you ought to care about those things. But you know what? If you care about the poor and the hungry and the weak, you don't need to believe in Jesus. You don't need to follow Jesus to try and fix those problems. You don't need to believe in Jesus to volunteer or to donate your money to worthy causes. And all I'm saying is, let's cut out the middleman, because there are a lot of us who don't accept Jesus, who are not followers of Jesus, who want to help and fix and solve all those same problems. And there's no difference between us if that's what we're interested in. So stop trying to align yourself with Christian beliefs and just say, okay, you know what, forget the church, and I'm going to throw Jesus out with the church too. You don't need Jesus to do good. So I'm interested in what your actions are. I don't care what rhetoric you use. I'm not really interested in you saying, it's not like I'm going to not be friends with a Christian, but oh, you're a follower of Jesus? Cool, we're buddies now. That's a conversation that's never going to happen. But if we are interested in those same things, then we don't need Jesus to do all of them. So let's just forget about Jesus. Let's do good because because kindness matters, because we can actually help people in this lifetime try to get through the day. That's way more important. So it doesn't matter what you want to call yourself. I'm interested in what your actions are. And unfortunately, from what I've seen, usually the actions from people who say they hate religion but love Jesus, their actions are not very different from the Christians that we've stereotypically come to know. I wish they were more like atheists, in which they would say, okay, well, I don't believe in any of that nonsense. I'm going to do good because this is the only life I have, and what other choice do I have? Why would I want to do anything but help other people? It's also important to note that you don't have to be a Christian to say you're a follower of Jesus. A lot of atheists could easily say they're a follower of Jesus as well, and say, hey, I too want to care for those less fortunate. And you don't have to believe in all the miracles and the supernatural parts of his story or his mythology to do all those things. So it's very easy for atheists to say, I want to believe in this idea of Jesus. But, and even if you want to argue that he was a historical figure, that he actually existed, okay, fine. We can all emulate people that we think did amazing things. We all have role models. For a lot of Christians, Jesus may be the role model. For a lot of non-Christians, they may have other people that they look up to, that they want to strive to be like, and that's fine and all well. The difference for me is that it's not like Christians are ever just saying, I want to be like Jesus. It's never just that. It always comes, hook and sinker with all these other beliefs that I don't agree with, that I don't believe in, all the supernatural stuff. Because you can't just follow Jesus when you say that. You got to believe that he was born of a virgin. You got to believe that he was resurrected. You got to believe all this nonsense that there's no evidence for. And I wish followers of Jesus would just say, forget all that stuff. The idea I have of him in my head is this really cool guy, this, sandal-wearing hippie who went around and helped people. I want to be like that. Hey, if they just said that and they dismissed all the other stuff, I would totally get on board with it. My name is Hemant Mehta, and I write at friendlyatheist.com. Please leave your comments below.